So here we go. Hello, everyone. I'm Duke from the Orland Park Library. Welcome to today's program, Whose Lane Is It Anyway? Sharing the Road with Cyclists. This bicycle-friendly driver program, developed by the League of American Bicyclists, is an interactive class aimed at educating all drivers on the best and safest ways to share the road with people on bicycles. Dave Simmons, president of Friends of Cycling in Elk Grove and executive director of Ride Illinois, will lead this session and discuss the best and safest ways for motorists and cyclists to share the same space. Just a quick reminder before we start, if you have any technical difficulties related to Zoom, my suggestion is that you restart Zoom and is to close Zoom and then type in the webinar ID once more to try it again. And if you have any other difficulties, you can always message me and I can walk you through it. So without further ado, Dave Simmons.
Great, thank you, Duke, and welcome everyone. Appreciate the introduction. So my name is Dave Simmons. I'm going to give a little bit of an overview of Ride Illinois, if you don't know about us, and then we're going to jump into the meat of the presentation. So appreciate you being here today. Ride Illinois is a statewide nonprofit bike advocacy organization. We have several goals, all of them really center around making biking better, and that's for both folks who ride for transportation and recreation. So you can see some of our goals there. Education is one that certainly is true today with this session, and we'll be talking about one of our most important educational tools towards the end of this session. We are a mighty staff of 3. So myself as the executive director, I've been in the role since October, though a local bike advocate for well over a decade now. Gina runs our communications and is our project coordinator, and Ed Barsati, who had been in the role of executive director for nearly 20 years, is happily partially retired, semi-retired, but is still doing some consulting work for us. Did want to recognize a few of our corporate members, folks who have supported us financially, and they're helping to spread our message around the state. Ways you can help Ride Illinois. If you're not familiar with us, find out a little bit about us. As I mentioned before, we want to encourage folks to ride for recreation and transportation. That's all ages and abilities. The more people that are on bikes, the better job we're doing. Another thing, just to note, I'm not going to read all of these bullet points here, but we do encourage folks to follow the rules of the road. And that's the kind of, if you do a 180 from the presentation we're doing today, which is talking about driving around cyclists, know that Ride Illinois promotes riding and following the laws. So stop signs and stop lights and those types of things. So we're trying to work it from both ends of the spectrum there. And we have a presence on social media, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, so you can find us there as well. My contact info, the email is real easy, dave@rideillinois.org. We also have a general email, which is info@rideillinois.org, if you wanted to reach out to the 3 of us. Duke already mentioned some of these, so we'd love to hear some questions and some chat, so please use the tools that Zoom provides, and this is being recorded. So if you want to re-watch it or you want to share it with others, I'm sure Duke will be sharing the link out at a later date. All right, so with that, I'm going to stop. That's the overview presentation, and I want to share a different presentation here, which is, bear with me just a second. I'm going to close out of this one. These are the fun technical aspects of working in Zoom, right? All right, let me see if I can find it here. That's my desktop. Okay, well, interesting. Duke, it kind of disappeared on me again. Hang on just a second.
It's okay, take your time.
I think I got it now. There we go. All right. So I'm going to present now. And Duke, if you could just confirm you're seeing a slide that says, whose lane is it?
Yes, I do.
Awesome. Thank you. All right. So yes, as Duke mentioned, the title of the session, whose lane is it? Sharing the road with bicyclists. Again, keep in mind that we are working to teach cyclists how to share the road with motorists as well. This just happens to focus on the motorists' experience out on the road. Mention my name and my titles. One of the other things that I've done, actually became a league cycling instructor 11 years ago. As a result, I'm able to teach safe cycling classes like this with support of the League of American Bicyclists. So it is one of the perks of getting certified as an instructor. So I enjoy speaking with folks, motorists, cyclists, and really just about anybody. Some sponsors. So Ride Illinois, mentioned earlier, the League of American Bicyclists, that's the national organization that is working on behalf of cyclists. And then, of course, the Orland Park Public Library. So just
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Can you open that up by chance, this one? Can you open up the presentation bigger, or is this? Yes, so we're unable to.
Oh, you're not seeing?
I mean, we see it, but it's the small version. Can you open this one up for this presentation?
Yeah, I thought I had. Let me share. Bicycle friendly driver.
Well, you know what? That's. I mean, we can see it. It's just it's the small. It's not opening it. It's not opening up.
Was the other one okay?
Yeah, the other one was, yes. That one opened up.
So let's try that again. I don't know why that would be. Sorry, folks. So I will share again. All right. So are you seeing my notes as well?
I see it. I see it, yes.
So now if I present, I thought that would do it. Any better?
That one didn't open up. But you know what? You can.
So what are you seeing right now, Duke? Are you seeing?
I'm seeing the full thing, so it didn't full screen it.
Try one more time. Make sure I'm.
Yeah, before it worked.
Yeah, this is Firefox. Well, you know, I can try the Chrome version since we got them both open.
Yeah, try the Chrome version. Let's see that one. Yeah, so that one opened up. There you go.
That's better. Okay. All right. So with this one though, I am gonna. Sorry, I'm gonna have to go to the version so I can see my notes. I don't want to not share information with folks. So I'll make this as large as possible. Is that getting better?
That would work. That would work.
Okay. Sorry, this is the magic behind the scenes. I have some notes I want to make sure I share with everyone. So I'll do that. Hopefully you're just seeing now the browser with the sharing the road with bicyclists topics we'll cover, right?
Correct.
Okay, perfect. All right. So sorry about that. So some of the topics we're going to cover are listed here. Some of the situations you might encounter while on the road and when you encounter cyclists, some terms that we want to make sure you're familiar with. Also, what do we teach cyclists? So how do we educate cyclists to make sure they're doing the proper thing? Talk about our bike safety quiz briefly, and then we want to make sure we have some time for questions as well. All right, so we can use the chat, or maybe that's the easiest thing to do, but want to know, folks that are on the call, how many of you drive or walk or bike, transit? Maybe all those, maybe, can't be none of them, but I'm going to assume that many of, if not everyone on the session drives a car. Many are walking, some are biking, some taking public transit, though it is kind of a tricky time right now with transit, but think about the, kind of what you've done in the past. All right, so look, I'm going to guess Brenda. Brenda's doing all of the above, which is great because that gives you different perspectives, right? Depending on the way you're getting around. Let me close this little chat here. So the focus of this session is driving your bicyclists. And I took this screenshot from Facebook. Ride Illinois ran some ads during the month of May. And I'll share some of those with you in just a moment. And the whole purpose of the ad was to eliminate or reduce common crash types. And so We have some short video ads. We had some graphics. This particular one talks about how cyclists can be somewhat invisible when cycling their trucks. And we got this really kind of scary comment from this individual whose name I blurred. But if you can read that, he says, FYI, if you're right in the middle of any lane with a sidewalk next to you, I'm going to make sure I hit you fast enough to fling your body on the sidewalk. It was a very eye-opening experience to have these ads out there and really get a sense of some of the animosity that's out there on the roads. And it came from both sides, both cyclists and motorists. And I think we all know that social media conversations can quickly devolve. So this was just happened to be one of those comments. So point is, there's some angry people out there. We want to try to lessen the anger or help educate folks so they kind of know why cyclists are doing these things. All right, so here's an ad from a series of ads from Fort Collins, Colorado. And the purpose of the ads was to humanize cyclists. So you'll see throughout this presentation, I'm not going to refer to bikes and cars. I'm going to be referring to motorists and cyclists because we are all people. And studies have shown if you can humanize the conversation that it takes some of the emotion out of it, you may have a more constructive conversation. So this really struck me as something, these are people that people in your neighborhood, maybe your neighbor, who if you don't think of them as a bike, you think of them as someone who is maybe going shopping or going to work or maybe out for a joyride. The fact is that we're all people, so do keep that in mind. Quick note about the Illinois Rules of the Road. The Illinois Rules of the Road, specifically when it comes to motorists, there's a few things that you can take away to drive safely around cyclists. I'm going to guess that most folks are familiar with the 3-foot law. So that was adopted nearly 10 years ago. And what that says is that motorists should give cyclists at least 3 feet of space between the outside of their side view mirror, to the handlebars when passing a cyclist. So that actually has been quite effective. Recently, a law has passed, and this was with backing, and actually Ride Illinois was the impetus on this one, which says a motorist can pass a cyclist even in a no passing zone, so a double yellow line, when it's safe to do so, to improve the cyclist safety. So if you're riding down a road that doesn't have a lot of traffic and you encounter a cyclist and there's just not enough space for both to pass that cyclist within the lane with 3 feet of space, you can go around or across the double yellow and legally, so you're not going to get a ticket for that, right? That's kind of a nuance to the laws that are out there, but we felt that was important because we don't want motorists to feel that they can't pass, nor do we want cyclists to cause queuing up of cars on a given road. We don't want people to drive unnecessarily close to a cyclist. You can be charged with reckless endangerment. Try to avoid parking in bike lanes. I know sometimes it's difficult to do, especially if you're in the city or a heavily urban area where there's not a lot of parking, but do keep in mind that you might be causing a disturbance there that could have otherwise some bad repercussions. And then treat cyclists as another vehicle. So if you see a cyclist out on the road, imagine that individual is in a car and think to yourself, well, if this person was in a car, what would I do? Would I try to turn in front of them? Would I nudge my horn so they move up so I can make a right turn? Those type of things. So just it's a nice way to kind of even the playing field, if you will. Now, there are laws that pertain to cyclists as well. And a cyclist is classified as a vehicle in Illinois. We're going to discuss that in just a little bit. But these are some that I called out because I do think they're important. So the first one, the term practicable, I wasn't familiar with it prior to going through the certification to become an instructor. but the law states that a cyclist should ride as practicable to the right-hand curve as possible. But there are times when that's not the case. And I'm going to read from the Illinois Vehicle Code. So the exceptions to that, and practical, think of it also as like feasible, right? So it doesn't mean you have to ride next to the curb if there's debris or if there's potholes or if there's drainage grates that run parallel to the roadway. That's a lot of times what you might find in that curb area. So practical means a little bit further out. Think kind of the right tire track of a car, or kind of where motorcyclists, you see them riding. So anyway, some of the exceptions are when overtaking or passing another bicycle, when preparing for a left turn. So obviously you can't make a left turn from the far right side of a lane. When approaching a place where a right turn is authorized, so that would be right-hand turn lane, or when it's necessary to avoid conditions, and I'm reading here, these are including but not limited to fixed or moving objects, parked or moving vehicles, bicycles, motorized pedal cycles, pedestrians, animals, surface hazards, or lanes that are not wide enough to share with another vehicle, called substandard lanes. So it's a lane that's too narrow for a bicycle or motorized pedal cycle and a vehicle to travel safely side by side. So when we talk about taking the lane, this is the law that says cyclists can do this, and we'll get into some of those details. But I will say that particular ad that we ran through May, it caused a few people to boil, because it is something that many motorists don't like to see, is when a cyclist is in the middle of the lane, but we'll talk about why that is. All right, so share the road. This is something, a phrase that's been around for a while, and the idea is that both cyclists and motorists have the legal right to the same space, with some exceptions, such as interstate highways and the like. But the hope is that through education and some of the campaigns Ride Illinois has been doing, we could ensure that both roadway users can safely share the same space. All right, oops. Sorry, let me go. Here we are. All right. So as I mentioned earlier, a bicycle is classified as a vehicle in the state of Illinois. If you read the Illinois Vehicle Code, it specifically speaks about bicycles. Now, some of the comments we often get are, well, you don't have a motor, so you can't be on the road. Well, it doesn't say that vehicles have to be motorized vehicles. So just keep that in mind. One of the main things that we teach, and that League of American Bicyclists and Ride Illinois will preach, is that cyclists have the same rights as well as the same responsibilities as motorists. So whether that's traffic laws or whether that's the way that cyclists are riding and communicating, there are laws that govern that, and cyclists should be obeying those laws as well. The smart cycling philosophy, that is the foundation of the League of American Bicyclists education program, and what that says is cyclists fare best when they act and are treated as drivers of vehicles. Oftentimes when I'll be teaching a class, someone will stop and have a question and say, well, I was doing this and this person was doing this, and I want to do this, so what should I have done? And more often than not, my response to that is, what would you do if you were driving a car in that situation? So that's that philosophy, that vehicular cycling. That way you're doing things that other roadway users are expecting to see. So again, that's something that we'll teach in our cyclist classes. I want to touch on infrastructure briefly. You'll probably notice that over the years, there's been more and more bicycle-specific infrastructure. Yes, there is a cost to it, but at the same time, it's a small fraction of the cost of a larger project or a roadway project. So by adding infrastructure that's specific to bicyclists and pedestrians, we're allowing people to get around in other ways and not really forcing them to drive a car. So the idea of the infrastructure is to increase safety, for the cyclists and oftentimes pedestrians, because some of the infrastructure works for them as well. And just to encourage and increase the number of folks that might be interested in biking for recreation and transportation. So there's a few examples here. And what they're trying to do is indicate to both cyclists and motorists, what direction should I be going? Where should I go when I encounter an intersection? And where should cyclists be, or where should I be looking for cyclists? So popular out west is the concept of the bike box. And what this does is, it's the far left picture on the bottom. It allows cyclists to move and position themselves in front of a motorist at a red light. And then the idea is that allows then the cyclist to pass through the intersection safely before moving back to what we say the right third. So you may see this concept maybe in Chicago. I'm trying to think if there's local examples, but that's one idea. Trail crossings. So just like there's pedestrian activation buttons, well, for pedestrians, sometimes along trails that are heavily trafficked by bicycles, you'll see the same thing. That specific example with the button and the sign is from Elk Grove Village, and it was added for safe access to Bussy Woods. The concept of sharrows, so that's the third picture. What that indicates to motorists is that this is a route that is frequented by cyclists. And for cyclists, it indicates approximately where the cyclist should ride. And in this particular photo, you can see there's some parked cars. The cyclist, by positioning the bike and kind of riding towards the center of that lane, they're avoiding any motorists opening doors in the line of travel. So, and we'll talk about dooring in a little bit as well. And then not only are they kind of fun, but they're kind of cute as well, is the bike signals. So might be a different time and schedule than your typical traffic lights. Just a few more that you might see. Directional paint. So you can see in this situation, a woman in their cargo bike is making a turn or is on a curve. And so that directional paint helps to keep the cyclist within the bike lane and separates the cyclist from the motorist. It's obviously not a physical barrier, but it helps to keep the two modes of traffic somewhat separate. Protected bike lanes, such as the one we have in the upper right, that has some plastic bollards and a little bit of spacing between the line of, in this case, it's actually a parking lane, and then the bike lane that's closest to the curb. So that's another option. The side path, so this is the bottom left. So this is actually physical separation from the roadway, where the bicyclists and pedestrians, in this case, in the side path near Woodfield Mall, have a dedicated space. These are typically wider sidewalks, 8 feet or 10 feet wide. And then the bottom right is an example of traffic signal activation. So in this particular situation, the community installed a sensor on the top of the stoplight across the way, and it points to this specific area with that painting of the cyclists. And so while many bikes can't trip a traffic light, the idea here is if the cyclist positions himself on top of that painted area, it will then trigger the light for the cyclist. So there's some creative things happening out there. Just a few others, directional paint tells the cyclist where to go. And in the situation on the far left, the idea is the cyclist is to cross through the double yellow and then go curbside. So, that may be confusing for someone who doesn't really know what's happening there. So the idea is, well, let's put some paint on the road to help clarify. Shared use paths, those are similar to what that example I had near Bussy Woods. Contraflow lanes. So those are the two examples on the right side. What that means is cyclists are allowed to go against traffic. So you tend to find these on one-way roads. And so if that road has been identified as a major thoroughfare for cyclists, instead of either picking another one-way road that might be kind of away from a main destination, the decision is made to just use that road and identify a space for cyclists that goes against traffic. So typically that's not safe to do, but here, because there is a separate space for the cyclist, it is allowed. So lots of creative, and I will say there's new and creative things happening. I won't say every day, but quite frequently. All right, so let's talk about some examples of common cyclist motorist crashes and how they can be avoided. I'm going to bore you with a few numbers here, though I'm not going to dig into all the details. The data on this slide is in Chicago and from 2012. I think everyone knows that there tends to be a little bit of a lag time as data is analyzed and calculated. So it might be a little bit out of date, but I haven't heard that there's any indications that there's been any major shifts here. So 50% of bicyclist motorist crashes are due to motorist errors. I just as soon say, it's 50-50. And that's kind of what the second to last bullet point says is, yeah, it's pretty much 50-50. So maybe Chicago's a little bit weighted more towards motors, but let's just say it's 50-50, because oftentimes there's something each individual can do. Intersections are a dangerous spot, not only for motorists, right? There's a lot of car crashes happen in intersections, but also for cyclists. And because cyclists don't have the protection around them, want to be particularly careful when encountering cyclists at intersections. And unfortunately, a quarter of crashes are hit and run. So obviously that doesn't help when it comes to any sort of traffic tickets, or, God forbid a cyclist is injured, then they're kind of left on their own for their insurance and for medical and whatnot. There are things that both motorists and cyclists can do to eliminate or reduce some crashes. So most often, as you can see, the motorist is failure to yield. So whether that's at an intersection, which is the most common of these instances, or some other place, yielding to other roadway users is a common cause. And then for cyclists, the most common error is riding against traffic. So there was a period of time that when kids were taught to ride their bikes against traffic, it was perceived to be safer because you could see traffic coming towards you. That has flipped on its side, or on its head now, and for the last 20 to 25, maybe even 30 years, the general consensus for safe ride with the flow of traffic. That reduces the impact. If it's a head-on collision, there's more impact. So if there is a crash, that's just one example why riding with traffic is safer. Plus, motorists don't expect to see someone coming at them in their lane of travel. A couple other stats there, including one about helmets. If someone does have a head injury, there's a greater chance of reduced injury or survival if the cyclist is wearing a helmet. All right, so as I mentioned earlier, I don't want to, there's no pointing of fingers here. We're really just saying that in many, if not most crashes, both of the roadway users could have done something differently. And that can be said for a car on car, bike on bike, or bikes and car crashes. So what we want to do now is focus on a few situations that are common situations that will help a motorist, in this case, avoid a crash with a cyclist. All right, so the first example I have here is a woman riding in a bike lane and is going against traffic. And I'm gonna jump into the presentation because I'm giving away the answers by doing this. All right, so the question here is it legal or not? If you're paying attention, you'll know that this is not legal. Mentioned just on the last slide that the common cause of cyclist crashes that are caused by cyclists is riding against traffic. So while she appears nice and happy and she's rolling down the road, it's not a safe thing to do. Here's another example where riding against the flow of traffic, which is what the cyclist is doing here. I think I can actually use a little pointer. I can find it here. Oh, let me try this. Maybe that's not, no, doesn't seem to be working. I thought I can use a little pointer there. Anyway, the cyclist is riding against flow of traffic. The motorist is making a right turn. Recently, statistics have come out that say that many motorists don't look to their right when making a right turn. They're looking for traffic coming, from the left to make sure that it's clear. So in this case, only bad things can happen. So the suggestion there is kind of train yourself to look right. This is something I've had to focus on as I become more aware of this. So look to the right. Make sure there's no pedestrians crossing, for example, on sidewalk, or a cyclist on the sidewalk, right? Just take that extra second to look at that. All right, so now here's a kind of a detailed scenario. This could be, anywhere USA in a parking lot. This happens to be from Colorado. In this situation, the cyclist is riding eastbound in the westbound traffic lane. So again, against traffic. The motorist is exiting the parking row and makes a right turn into the westbound lane. So very similar to that last situation, right? So while this is maybe a little more graphic than it needs to be, or graphic language, in this case, the bicyclist slammed into the windshield of the motor vehicle. And obviously there's damage to the motor vehicle, and then the cyclist was injured. So what can be done differently? So the bicyclist should ride with the flow of traffic, in this case in the eastbound lane. And again, motorists could take a quick peek just to make sure that there's nobody coming from that direction, even though the cyclist is at fault, right? They're riding the wrong direction. Duke, do we have a question or comment?
Yes, we do. We have a question. So it says, question reference last slide. It looks like only one lane of traffic. Is this a one-way route? She is in the bike lane. Would there need to be a bike lane on the other side to make it legal?
Let me go back, and I think it's this slide. Would you agree, Duke?
Yes,
Brenda?
I believe that's the slide they're referring to.
Yeah, right. So Brenda, it looks like it's one lane, right, in each direction. If there were a bike lane, now in this particular example.
Oh no, the lady. So it's actually the last slide before this one.
Oh, gotcha.
Yes, this one.
One lane of traffic. So Brenda, in this case, if this were the contraflow lane, which allows allows cyclists to ride against traffic, then it would be legal. Now the assumption is in this example that it's actually the bike lane you should be heading in the other direction. So assume there's an arrow pointing the other direction here. So maybe not the most clear example, but yes, so that's the idea. She's riding against traffic in a lane that's meant to go the opposite direction. And you're welcome. Good question. All right, let me go back to this poor guy poor guy, but someone who wasn't doing something they should have done, right? All right, so yes, this is what could have been done differently. Again, it takes both parties to avoid this situation. All right, so the term taking the lane may be a term that folks are familiar with, maybe not. But what I'm gonna do is explain to you what it is and why cyclists do this. And I will say this is something that can be uncomfortable as a cyclist. It can be perceived as kind of annoying to a motorist, but as you'll see, the point of it is safety. It's not to feel like anyone's skirting the laws or getting away with something. The overriding idea behind this and the fact that it's a legal maneuver is safety. So I probably gave away the answer to this one here, but in this situation, we've got three gentlemen riding on a somewhat narrow lane around a curve. And the question is, and the fact that they're kind of they're riding towards the middle of the lane, which I think we can all agree, a motorist or vehicle cannot fit on the left side of them. So is it legal or is it not? And it is legal. Cyclists can take the lane, if we go back to the Illinois Vehicle Code, when there's substandard width or not enough space for a vehicle to pass with at least 3 feet to the left of the cyclist in the same lane. So just to point out a few reasons why cyclists might take the lane. In the situation, that last one there, it's often the safest place. So the image that I have here, and I'll share, definitely share the links to these ads that Ride Illinois put together with help from IDOT. But this image here is me, and I'm riding very close to my home in Elk Grove. And you'll see there's raised curbs on both sides, and it's a pretty narrow lane. So I'm riding in the center of that lane. So there's just no way that a cyclist and a motorist can share that lane. You'll see in a second what the cyclist should do once they're beyond. You can see like when the curb ends, what the cyclist should do. Riding sidewalks can be illegal. It's oftentimes a local ordinance. It can also, so depending on your municipality, it may be legal or illegal. Either way, it can be unsafe for both pedestrians and cyclists. The way the Illinois law is written is that cyclists should dismount when encountering a pedestrian. So if, say, someone's riding for transportation, you can probably imagine that's not a real efficient way to get places. So we will encourage folks to ride on the roads, you know, to their level of comfort, and to ride with the rules of the road in mind, in order to preserve that space on the sidewalk for pedestrians. We want to prevent being buzzed or sideswiped. Obviously, that can be a startling situation. Cyclists can trigger lights and signals, especially if there's the sensor that's up above. I happen to ride a rather old steel mountain bike, so if I see what they call loop detectors in the cement, I could position my bike over that and it will trip a light, but that's not always the case. If we're left-hand turn, but the takeaway, cyclists aren't taking the lane to anger a motorist. It certainly can be a momentary delay, but it's not meant to enrage a motorist. So in this case, we've got two gentlemen riding side by side, one on either side of the solid white line. Is this legal? So cyclists in Illinois, and most states for that matter, can ride two abreast, which may cause a motorist to go on the other side of this double yellow. But in this situation, with the visibility for oncoming traffic and being able to see if there is anyone coming, that's a perfectly safe maneuver for a motorist. So in Illinois, if a motorist does that, they cannot be ticketed by police for crossing a double yellow. And that's something Ride Illinois pushed for a couple of years ago. All right, so just a few other examples. We mentioned debris and potholes, roadkill. You know, if you go on a bike ride and you go through certain areas, you'll be amazed at how much roadkill is out there. But really, anything that might be in that right third of the lane, if there's something in that lane of travel, the idea is to move a little bit to the left. We talked about narrow lanes. It's also a place where cyclists are most visible, is if they're in the center of the lane, as opposed to hugging the curb or staying far to the right. The door zone, we will touch on that in just a second. We want to avoid car doors opening into the lane of travel, which can be a pretty dangerous situation. And again, it's not intended to anger motorists. All right, another scenario here, and this, maybe not for the faint of heart when it comes to cyclists, is crossing an interstate. In this case, the cyclist was in the correct lane of traffic, and they're passing the overpass here. The motorist was moving in the same direction, and what happened is the motorist attempted, in this case, it's a truck of some kind, attempted to pass the cyclist on the bridge by going into the oncoming traffic lane, which is a legal maneuver for both parties here. But the motorist had to move back because there was oncoming traffic. So it wasn't clear in that situation. So the motorist really should have waited. And so what could have been done differently. Though it seems very daunting for a cyclist to take the lane against a large vehicle like that, it can be done safely if it's done well in advance of the situation. I myself, I ride with a mirror on my helmet so I can see behind me, and we teach cyclists to not make sudden movements. If I saw a truck coming and I knew it was going to be a problem, I could take that lane much sooner than I would really even need to alert the motorist, the driver of the truck, as well as the person that's oncoming. Makes it a little more visible. So the motorist could have waited for the safe and legal place to pass. Now, I don't like this photo because it depicts, it's called a ghost bike, when there's a bike painted white like that. It depicts that someone was struck and killed. So maybe too strong an image, but let's just assume there was a minor crash and that was the worst of it. There's a few signs you might see, motorists might see on the road. The one on the right, the may use full lane, is a little bit more common, but it's also a little bit dated. But the idea here is if you see this sign, you may encounter a cyclist, and that cyclist might be in the middle of the lane because of that substandard width. The one on the left is one that Ride Illinois worked with IDOT, and actually the sign was recently approved by IDOT. It's a little bit more direct, and it indicates that distance between a cyclist and a motorist. So we're hoping to see more and more of those around Illinois in the coming years. All right, so the door zone, mentioned this a couple times, and it is more common in heavily urban areas, in Chicago, for example, where there's parking, a row of parking along travel lanes. So a cyclist wants to avoid that door zone, which means they're going to ride a little bit further away from the cars. In this case, there appears to be plenty of space for these cartoon cars anyway to travel and still give the cyclist enough space. But what this is depicting is, we want a cyclist, and what we teach a cyclist is to take a straight line of travel and not kind of weave in and out and try to be a magnet to the curb. So that improves the visibility of the cyclist. It improves the confidence of the motorist that might be passing them because they're just going straight. So we want to, again, that's what we teach the cyclists. And if you encounter a cyclist who might be riding a little further into the lane than you might think is reasonable, that might be the cause. This might be hard to see, but it's another example. It's actually a real world example versus a cartoon where the bike lanes are right just outside the parking lane. So in this situation, what we teach cyclists is stay to the far left of that bike lane, just again to avoid that door zone. And so how can we avoid a dooring crash? Some of you may have heard the term the Dutch reach. It's relatively new. It's actually something that is on the Illinois driver's test now. But the idea behind the Dutch reach is instead of just opening the door with your left hand, we ask motorists to reach over with their right hand, thereby kind of forcing them to look into the side view mirror and open the door that way. So I myself have to still work on that and kind of teach myself to do that. But that is one way. It's very popular in Europe, hence the name. And then the bicyclist should look for signs. Are there brake lights? Is there exhaust, coming from the tailpipe? Can you see someone sitting in the car? Just to be cautious and be aware of someone who might be opening the door. All right, a few other statistics to share with you. This scenario is often called the left cross, where a motorist will turn in front of a cyclist because they misjudge the speed of the cyclist, and the cyclist is coming straight through. So you can see this is common, and because you've got vehicles moving in or colliding, kind of a head-on collision, it can result in a pretty serious injury. So the idea here would be a motorist who sees this, we ask just for a little more patience, and obviously we would tell the cyclist to be kind of hyper aware in that situation because again, it is an intersection where a lot of crashes occur. So yeah, so here's what we can do. We can slow down. Motorists can slow down and wait until the traffic clears. The photo here actually shows what we teach cyclists, which is don't hide in that shadow of the vehicle, right? If we were right behind that big yellow van on a bike, that motorist who's looking to turn left may not see you. So, sit back a little bit. And again, I mentioned the kind of the misjudging of speed. All right, so here's just another scenario here. Same guys. As you can imagine, a lot of these are kind of staged, but they are real world. So the question is this legal or not? We got two gentlemen riding on the shoulder, and then we've got two vehicles that pass them by crossing the yellow line and leaving, as you can see, plenty of space between the vehicle and the cyclists. And so the answer to that is, yeah, that's legal. And you can see there's oncoming traffic, but it looks like there's plenty of space for the two trucks to move back into their lane and pass the cyclist in plenty of time. All right, so not to inundate you with tips, but here's a few that you can keep in mind. Again, cyclists are essentially a slow-moving vehicle, so we ask you to treat them as such. Many comments we got from our digital ad campaign were, and I'll kind of ad lib here as well, if you can't do the speed limit, stay off the road. While we replied to very few of the comments, because I don't know that social media is the way to necessarily change people's minds, but we did say, well, it's called the speed limit for a reason. While interstates may have a minimum speed, most arterials and smaller roadways do not. So it's okay to be a slow moving vehicle. All right, I think we've touched on those other scenarios. The right hook is another example. I want to show a video of this once we finish these next few slides, but this is where, again, a motorist perceives that the cyclist is moving slower than they are, and they misjudge and make a right turn in front of a cyclist. So that, as you can see, is a fairly common crash as well. All right, so you got two people out on a joyride. They're going through an intersection here. So just some tips to, again, at intersections to avoid that right hook. Be patient, let the cyclist go through the intersection and then make your turn. All told, yeah, there might be a few second delay, but unless you're rushing to the birth of your child or something, that I think most people can take a few seconds to slow down. All right, and I think this is the final of these scenarios. Is this legal or not? So same two guys in this case. The motorist chooses to stay in the lane, not cross the double yellow. And as you can see, it's very close to the cyclist. So I think the obvious answer here is that this isn't legal. If a crash were to occur in this scenario, the motorist would be at fault. All right, I added this picture. I couldn't find the exact image I was looking for, but the picture of the image and the gentleman waiting for the metro train. There was a great image shared recently, and the gist of it was to give the idea of what it feels like to be passed by a vehicle while you're on a bicycle, and let's say it's the vehicle's moving 50 miles an hour. Similar to that sensation you feel when a train passes by. Like you wouldn't stay in that little yellow strip, right, when a train passes by. So it's just a way to try to kind of share what that might feel like. And obviously a train is much bigger than a vehicle, but I think the idea, the idea resonated with me. So what we ask motorists to do is, just give some extra room. Also know that, when the larger the vehicle, the more of a wind blast that might cause, which could knock a cyclist off. So by giving more space, you reduce the amount of wind blast, and do check for cyclists just as you would for other cars in your blind spots. here's a situation that might get some people's blood boiling too. This is more extreme when you've got a really large pack of cyclists out there known as a peloton. It's not super common, though it does happen, right? So yes, some patience will be needed. The cyclist shouldn't be riding more than 2 abreast. So in this case, they're in the wrong, but if you do need to pass, we suggest you tap your horn and kind of work with the cyclist to find a way to safely pass. So that's really one of the more extreme situations. But other things you might encounter, obviously distracted driving is in the news quite a bit. So whether it's cell phones or young children, there's plenty of things that all motorists, myself included, can be distracted by. So be conscious of that. Try to remove some of those distractions when you're out driving. The sun and the fog, that reduces visibility. That also reduces your ability to see a cyclist who might be out there. Illegal courtesy. So what that means is, if let's say you encounter a cyclist at a four-way stop and you decide to wave them through, we'd recommend you just treat that situation just as you would if the cyclist were in a car. Okay, if you get there first, it's first come, first serve. Just go ahead and go through. It could cause a lot of confusion, especially if it's a busy four-way stop. That's kind of where the term illegal courtesies come from. It could also cause a crash of some kind. So treat the cyclist as another vehicle and just address that situation as you would if there were all vehicles on the road. Kids on bikes, I want to mention that. Obviously, that'd be a terrible situation if there was a crash involving a child on a bike. So be particular or pay particular attention when you see children on bikes. They are more unpredictable. They may do things that you just really don't expect. So give plenty of space when you see that. So then just a couple things about what we teach cyclists. I'm not going to read all these. You can see what they are, but the main idea is communicate with other road users, be visible, be predictable. And again, ride with the vehicular cycling idea in mind. This is a photo of some of my friends from a local group I'm involved with. Yes, they're riding 2 abreast. This is a neighborhood road. So there's not a lot of traffic. When we encounter more traffic, we'll either go single file or we may take the lane for a little while and then move back to the right third if there's a lot of traffic. And we'll stop at stop signs. We obey the lights as well. But communication, hand signals is another big thing. So as I mentioned earlier, the visible, predictable, and communication, that can do a lot. As a cyclist, if someone does something that I appreciate, which means maybe they give me extra space, maybe they, that's the most common one. Maybe they're patient while I go through an intersection. They're going to make it by. I'll wave. I want to appreciate that. I want to kind of pass that on. Certainly not looking to make anyone angry. And so we ask that motorists kind of do the same, and just know that, again, we're all people. We're all just trying to go about our day, and not the vast majority are just looking to kind of get from point A to point B. And then a quick plug about our bikesafetyquiz.com. Note the big yellow arrow. Oh, now I found my pointer. Sorry, a little late for that. We have a motorist quiz. Oops. And the idea behind the motorist quiz is really the same idea behind this session here, which is teach motorists how to drive safely around cyclists. Notice we also have adult cyclist and child cyclist quiz, which is something that over 100,000 people in the state of Illinois have taken these quizzes. So they're free. There's no spam. It's a Google format, so it's real easy to use. And then there will be Spanish and PDF versions available soon as well. So I would suggest, if you have time, it takes about 15-20 minutes, take our motorist / driver's ed quiz, and it'll reinforce some of the things we discussed today, as well as share some additional situations that you may find useful. And this is just a sample question. It's one that most people will get wrong. The idea is there's a cyclist waiting at a stoplight. Where should you, as a motorist, wait for that cyclist? Motorist number one is far behind the cyclist, giving them plenty of space, not wanting to encroach on them. Excuse me. And then number two, closer to the cyclist, but still not to the point where, maybe it's an aggressive move. And in this case, the correct answer is number two. The reason being that either the loop detectors in the asphalt or cement, or the sensors on top of the street lights, the traffic lights, may not sense the cyclist that stays far back. So these are the types of situations you'll find in Bike Safety Quiz. So take it and let me know what you think. All the questions on the Bike Safety Quiz were vetted and approved by the Secretary of State, so they pertain to relevant Illinois state laws. All right, so in summary, keep in mind, we're all people. We want to treat bicyclists as the drivers of vehicles, knowing that the law recognizes both cyclists and motorists as drivers of vehicles. We want to try to avoid crashes, so I hope there are at least a couple things you took away from the session today that can help that, especially the intersections, right? Those are a particularly dangerous area. We talked about taking the lane and why cyclists might do that. Also giving cyclists plenty of space when passing. And then of course the motorist quiz from Bike Safety Quiz, collectively between the motorists who help to keep the road safe and the cyclists who more and more anyway are doing what they should. I know blowing stop signs, for example, is certainly something that we're trying to impress upon cyclists as something not to do. Collectively, we can make our roads safer. So we do have some time for questions. While you think of questions, I'm going to bring up one of our ads here real quick, and hopefully this will. Duke, could you let me know, are you seeing the digital ad safety campaign?
I am, yes.
Okay, thank you. All right, I don't know how well the audio will be, but that's not entirely necessary. So we've got one here, and these we put on YouTube for taking the lane. Let's see if I can go full screen.
Perfect.
So that is totally staged. That's me and then my daughter taking video from the dashboard. But that's an example. And then just one more, because I think this is particularly poignant. So what this is saying is depicting kind of the view from a truck or a large vehicle. So yeah, that one kind of is kind of blows people's minds when they see how many people may be in a truck's blind spot. And yeah, so there's other ads that you can see on here. Again, the focus is eliminating or reducing motorist cyclist crashes by teaching both roadway users to do what's right. All right, Duke, do you or others have any questions? Be happy to entertain any questions you have.
Okay, I don't see any questions so far, but I do have, I guess I have a question. So my father, he loves bikes. He worked on bikes his whole life. He fixed them. I think that was his job when he was a teenager, was he fixed bikes for people. But recently he wants to get a new unicycle. And I'm just wondering, do the same rules apply to something like that if somebody just so happened to be riding a unicycle on the road?
Yeah, and you know what? I mean, a unicycle is one example of not a common bike. I mean, there's so many different kinds of bicycles out there now, and a unicycle would fall into that same class, right? So he should ride with traffic. He should, obey the rules of the road and stopping at stop signs and even hand signals. That's something that's written in the Illinois Vehicle Code, saying that cyclists should give hand signals. They should give them 100 feet before an intersection. But if they can't, because it's unsafe or there's gravel, they don't have to. So yeah, the short answer to your question is, yeah, that would still all apply. Okay. But hey, good for him. That's fantastic.
Oh, I think we just got something. Let's see.
Right. Oh, Brenda gets a gold star today. Oh, okay. So I see it too. You have a page set up for your biking friends. Would I be able to share any of those YouTube? Yeah. So Brenda, you can, here, I'll put this link on the Ride Illinois website. Will take you to it's 3 videos, very, very homegrown. Again, it's me and my daughter, and we got some assistance from a consultant, but IDOT funded them so that we could have a wider reach. And then some of these graphics as well. Yeah, please do. We'd be happy to, if you'd share them, feel free to share them on social media. These were vetted by IDOT. This isn't Ride Illinois saying this is what you should do. This is, this is the way the law is written, and we have IDOT support. So yeah, please share as much as you'd like. And then one last note here, if I can get to this page here. We did some other webinars that might be of interest to folks on the call or those that watch the recording. Things such as there's 3 on bike infrastructure. There's also basic bike maintenance, the bike law. We have actually 2 of our corporate members are attorneys that specialize in cyclist crashes. Here's this session here. Some cycling games. This was from a woman in Denmark. You'd be amazed at what they do in Denmark to teach children how to bike. Exploring Southern Illinois by bike. There's some great places to ride down there. There's the infrastructure sessions, which go really in depth. It's from a city planner perspective. The idea was to teach some city planners detailed information about infrastructure. And then the Ride of Silence, which is an annual event that happens. But these are all on this. Put this in the chat. Just rideillinois.org/events/webinars. And if there are other topics, we're always looking for new information. I mean, Duke, if you guys had anything you wanted us to address, or you have other content you want us to share, please let us know. With everything everyone's dealing with right now, this is kind of the way we share information. So we make the best of it.
Absolutely. So the Orland Park Library would love to, thank you, Dave Simmons, for presenting. And if anybody has any questions for me, I will be on here for a short period, probably another 30 seconds. So if there is anything that needs to be mentioned, me and Dave will wait a good 30 seconds, and that will be that.
And I just put my email, again, Dave@rideillinois.org. Feel free to reach out with questions, or if you want to go in depth on anything else. But Duke, thank you for the invitation. Appreciate the time and the effort you put into setting this up. I know.
No, absolutely. Thank you. I appreciate that. And the Orland Park Library just wants to thank everybody for tuning in.
Great.
Thanks, so thank you. We'll be signing off.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.